With most of Tennesseans feeling like their voices are simply being ignored in D.C., there's a growing movement to change our representatives in the Senate. Conservatives and Tea Partiers in particular are calling for a new, strong voice to stand for our values in order to try to make D.C. hear what we have to say. Now, one man who has stood up to answer that call is Danny Page. He's with us today. Thank you very much for being with us. Danny, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this opportunity.
Well, I always try to make the show available for candidates who have a positive conservative message, especially if they are focused on standing up for what the people have to say and what's going to be of most value for the American people as a whole, not just the locals. If you don't mind, go ahead and tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Tim, my name is Danny Page. I'm a resident of a little town just north of Nashville called Greenbrier, Tennessee, and I'm a Christian. I'm a husband of 20 years. My wife and I just celebrated our 20th anniversary this week. We have 6 living children, 2 that have gone on to be with the Lord, 3 daughters, 3 sons. They're all homeschooled. They range in age from 7 to 18 of years of age. I am a licensed journeyman certified electrician. I work for a electrical contracting firm here in Nashville, Tennessee that mostly does commercial, industrial, electrical installations. I'm a project manager. I've been doing electrical work for the past 20 years. So I am a blue-collar worker, a middle-class guy. I feel the same aches and pains in this economy as most Americans do. I spent all morning trying to repair my 18-year-old daughter's Ford Explorer that broke down last night, and I can tell you this, I bet those engineers at Ford Motor Company have never had to do what I did this morning. But nevertheless, I'm a regular guy. I got grease on my hands like a lot of Americans do today. I wake up just like you do, and I put my shoes on just like you do, and I'm trying to fight for my family. I want my sons and daughters to know liberty and freedom much more than I have in my 38 years on this earth.
So basically, your campaign slogan is not just a slogan. It is truly who you are, an average American, an everyday Tennessean.
That is correct, Tim. That is who I am. I am the guy that you're going to see at the grocery store, the guy you might see out getting dinner with his family, the guy you'll see driving down the road fighting this traffic here in Nashville. I'm an average American, an everyday Tennessean. I'm not an elitist. I don't wear $1,000 suits. I don't drive high-end cars. And, I'm on a budget. My wife and I do the Dave Ramsey plan, where we penny it out. We zero it out, and what comes in every week, we assign it somewhere to go, and that's how we live our life. She's a stay-at-home mom, a homeschool mom, so we have to make it work on one middle-class income with 6 children, and we do that by the grace of God, but we do that. And I feel like that Tennesseans, in general, are sick to death of politicians. And what I've discovered just being in this race, Tim, is that there is a machine, whether you're Democrat or whether you're Republican Party, there is a machine, and they do not appreciate average Americans, everyday Tennesseans, jumping in the fray. They want to know where your allegiance is, and when you're not part of the machine, they understand that your allegiance is not to them. They want you to start at the bottom and work your way up. But I have a calling on my life to run for Senate. I don't have a calling to be a state rep. I don't have a calling to be a mayor, to be a school board, or a councilman. I'm an electrician trying to raise a family. God's spoken to my life, and I'm taking this day by day. And the machine cannot stand it that I'm not going through their steps, their protocol, because they understand that if I do get elected, then I'll have no allegiance to them. And they've tried to discourage me every way they can. And I say, you know what, if you don't believe in me, just let me fall on my face. But that's not what they're worried about. What they're worried about is the people rising up and electing a member of we the people instead of a member of the ruling class, and that worries them.
All right. Well, I have to say, one of the things that really drove home for me how genuine you are about it is when you sent me your pictures for the show media player. You know, so many times we see candidates that are already trying to look the part, they get the suit, the tie. You sent me a family picture, you in T-shirts with your family and in jeans and just out having fun together. And that, to me, really demonstrates exactly where you're coming from. So I've got to say I love that, and I hope more people understand what that message is, because a lot of people are just like, you got to be suit and tie. But part of that problem is people who are going to put party politics ahead of what's best for the American people, and in this particular case, the Tennessee people as well. And I think that you hit the nail on the head, that this machine wants you to be just another cog to force their agenda, whatever it may be. And unfortunately, right now it seems like to a lot of folks who are paying attention that whether it's the Republican machine or the Democratic machine, they're both headed towards basically the same agenda, just one a little bit faster than the other. And they very well should be concerned about it. My next question was going to be basically, what was it that led you to challenge for Senator Alexander's seat specifically? But I think you kind of already hit on that pretty well. Quite honestly, you're fighting for your family. And
with him,
that is one. Go ahead.
I'm very aware. I'm not a low information voter. I'm a high information voter. I'm plugged in. I pay attention. I read. I listen. I watch. I'm involved on that level. I vote. I help campaign for Rick Santorum. I help campaign for Romney. Help campaign for a local guy that ran for Congress in 2012. Other than that, other than knocking on doors, making phone calls, writing a few checks, posting some yard signs, you know, that's just a reasonable service of someone who enjoys liberty. I didn't put on the uniform and go serve my country, but I can go out at night and post signs and knock on doors and make phone calls to serve my country. And it's time we liberate Washington, D.C. They'll take our focus off what's going on here at home, here domestically, and go liberate Iraq and go liberate this place and that place. You know, the nations are endless on this earth that could be liberated, and we could always justify it. There are dictators all over this world. There are monsters all over this world, bad governments all over this world, and we can also always justify liberating somebody. But the liberation needs to take place in Washington, D.C., and we need regime change. And it angered me that all the people that were, quote-unquote, qualified to run for U.S. Senate to challenge Lamar Alexander would go into his office behind closed doors and then come out of his office shaking his hand, endorsing him. And it frustrated me, and I took it to God in prayer, and I said, why is this? Our country is going down the tubes. And he spoke to me and said, why don't you serve? And, I mean, that hit me like a ton of bricks, and I prayed about it. I meditated about it. I took it to heart. I took it to my wife. I took it to people that I allow to speak into my life spiritually, my life group leaders. I took it to my pastor. We all began to pray about it, and doors began to open, and God just took this thing from a thought to a dream, and now we're seeing God really move and open people's eyes. There needs to be a spiritual awakening. Our country was founded on the providence of God by men who were seeking God's will to establish a free nation in this world, a nation where the gospel of the kingdom of God has gone out like no other nation in this earth. But in the past 30 or 40 years, we've seen a spiritual drought take place. We've seen a spiritual famine, a spiritual pestilence has come upon us. We're in the judgment of God, and unless we do what God prescribed in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14, we will not see America saved. Ted Cruz can't save America. Danny Page can't save America. Whoever lines up to be president, senator, or congressman, no man, no woman can save America. Only God can. And we can do that by alerting his people. When my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, will seek my face, will turn from their wicked ways, then will I heal their land. I will hear from heaven and heal their land. God told Solomon to tell the people of Israel that, but verse 13 says, tell them when you see the pestilence, when you see the famine, when you see the drought. We see those things, not necessarily physical things, but these spiritual things are happening to America. The judgment of God is upon us because we have turned from him. The Bible says that righteousness exalts a nation, and God exalted us in our first couple of 100 years because we were on our face seeking his will. But in the past 30 or 40 years, we've decided we've got it. We know how to do this. We don't need you, God. And Jesus said, when you exalt yourself, God's going to abase you. And that's where we're at right now. We're in the abasing of God. He has brought us down, and he is humbling us. And that's a scary place to be. It's a hard place to be. I'd rather humble myself than have his mighty hand humble me.
Yeah. That's a very profound statement. And I hope that a lot of people who are listening actually take that to heart. A lot of folks, unfortunately, in politics tend to brush aside the religious part because they're so accustomed to hearing how we're supposed to separate church and state, which is, unfortunately, like a lot of other things, been terribly twisted as far as what it actually was intended. We're supposed to be free to worship, not have to hide our faith. And our founding fathers certainly made no qualms about their belief in the providence of God and his leadership in our nation. And, like I said, that was a very profound statement, and I appreciate the fact that you have that as a guiding principle. Now, if, say, the people do decide that they hear your message and they are going to cast their ballots for you, and you upend Lamar and anybody else that's challenging him down the road, whether it be the Democratic candidate or a couple of other folks that are trying to challenge him in the primary, what do you feel like should be the very top priority for your first senatorial term?
I'm a guy that believes that the Senate was designed by our founders to be a voice for the state legislature, a voice for the state capitol, a voice for state rights. The 10th Amendment recognizes the right of the state. And the progressives, the statists in this country in the early 1900s had a constitutional amendment that changed the way we elected our senators. You know, if you have a need, if you have an issue, if you have a problem, you're some congressman, in your district, and voice that concern, raise Cain with them, whatever how you get your point across, let them know. But the senators are supposed to be the voice of the state and watching over the rights that the states have, and that has been trampled on for the past 100 years. So I'm going to be a voice for the state. Our state is a very red state, a very conservative state. But when we get to the federal level, our senators are far from that. I mean, they'll put a TV ad on and tell us how conservative they are, but 62% of the time, Lamar Alexander votes the way Barack Obama wants it. That's not conservative. But our debt is destroying any potential liberty that we'll have in the future. If we do not get a hold on this, there's not going to be a country left for my children, my grandchildren that I suppose I'll have one day. We have got to get control of this thing. And these continuing resolutions and this $16 and $17 trillion worth of debt that we're facing is ungodly, uncalled for. It's a shame. When our own leaders, supposedly conservative leaders, will get in front of a microphone and say, if we don't borrow more money, we're going to default, that is a lie. That is a sham. And to go into a back room and get a $2 billion kickback for your state, we can pay the debt. We got plenty of money coming in. but we may have to buckle down and do without some of the things that we, quite frankly, did pretty good without for 3 weeks. But I am focused on the debt, and one thing you'll learn about me, Tim, I'm a very transparent guy, sometimes to a fault. Sometimes I give a little too much information, and people are like, wow, Danny, you really put it out there. But that's just who I am, and you won't have to worry about me. You won't have to worry about getting a hold of me, getting a response from me, me hiding in the summertime from town halls, because I'll be glad to tell the people what's going on in Washington and what needs to be done in Washington and where I stand and where the state is telling me to go. And that's just who I am. I am sick to death of politicians. I believe in term limits. I have no desire to be a career politician. I have no desire to go to Washington, D.C. and live and be away from my wife and 6 children. But I believe it's a calling, and I'm willing to serve. And when I say serve, I mean serve. We, the people, are the leaders in this country. We don't need to be electing leaders. We need to be electing servants. And Lamar Alexander and Bob Corker are in this ruling class, this hierarchy, and they go to the Senate and they stay there for decades, some of these guys. And Lamar promised 2 terms, and now he's asking for a third. He's 73 years old. I want to send him home to meet his grandchildren because he's been in Washington since 1991, and it's time that he go home.
Okay. Well, what would you say to a Lamar supporter who talks about his long lineage and all of the great service to the state that he has performed to this point? Because I'm going to allow that Lamar has always been more of a get-along to get-along kind of Republican as opposed to a staunch conservative. There's no question there. But you do still hear a lot of this pushback from Lamar supporters who are just caught up with all the things he's done from the time he was president at UT, the time he was Secretary of Education. And somehow they've got this misidea that we should keep electing him as kind of a reward for what he's already done. What do you have to say about that?
Right, and I get that everywhere I go. Lamar has possibly more name recognition in this state than Jesus Christ our Lord. And I say that somewhat sarcastically, but everybody knows who Lamar is, and I've met people that have not met Jesus. So Lamar was elected governor when I was 4 years old. He's always been here. He comes across as a likable guy. I've met people that personally know him, and they say that he is a very nice guy, and he's the type of guy that you just like. He's a likable guy, and I understand that. But there are other likable people in this state. I'm a pretty likable guy myself, but I'm a conservative, and there's the difference between Lamar and I. We can have a likable guy and have a conservative. We can have a guy that will listen to the people and that person be conservative. We don't have to settle for Lamar. We appreciate the service that Lamar has performed for the state in whatever capacity, but we have to point towards his failings, the very fact that he will not listen to us now. He will not take phone calls. He will not respond to emails. That's problematic. He resigned from Republican leadership a couple of years ago, and his testimony of that was so that he could work with Democrats. And there was a day when you could work with Democrats, but today with the liberals and the progressives, these statists, that liberal far-left agenda is being crammed down our throat. We don't need Lamar Alexander working with those guys. We need Lamar Alexander standing in the gap saying, no, sir, no, ma'am. That intrudes on the rights of the state of Tennessee. This is a sovereign state, and we're not going to vote for that. That's what the Senate's supposed to be doing. When the House passes a law, the Senate's supposed to say, no, that tramples on our state's rights, and we're not for that. Time we're seeing these leftist agendas hatched in the Senate. Obamacare was hatched in the Senate. I mean, that alone is unconstitutional since the Supreme Court ruled it as a tax. And he wants to say, I voted against Obamacare, but how many times did he vote yes for cloture that allowed the thing to come to the floor time and time again? We've got to point out his record, and when you point out his record to people that like him, the people that usually support him, they find out, oh, I didn't know that about him. I didn't realize. They take for granted that I elected a likable guy. I elected a guy that's been around a long time. I feel like I can trust him. And then they go about their everyday life, and they're not paying attention, low-information voters, as they've been called. And when they find out the truth, they find out the facts that are readily available on the Internet, and most of us have access to that today. It's not something that we're blowing smoke about. It's not something we're going around town saying this or that. It's provable fact. And when they find out about his voting record, they turn quickly away from him. And we've got to get that message out. He's got about $4 million in the bank already, and he's going to put out a message on TV. Politicians are allowed to falsely advertise. That's the only loophole in that advertising law. Politicians say whatever they want. They can lie, they can cheat, they can steal, and they get away with it. And he's going to advertise on TV how awesome he is. But it's up to us to make phone calls, to get on the blogs, to knock on the doors, to go out in our grocery stores, to go in our Sunday school class unashamed, unafraid, and say it's time for a change. Don't sit back on your heels and say, God save America, when God's saying, do your part. It's time to rise up. The silent majority cannot be silent anymore.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is absolutely amazing to me. The one thing that I think a lot of folks don't really, pay much attention to. Congress, the entirety of Congress, both the House and the Senate, have some of the lowest approval ratings that they've ever had in history, but they still have some of the highest rates of return of us keep sending the people back. Because it's always the case, well, it's never our guy. And it's usually just a case of us not paying attention to our guy. So I tend to agree with you. You're absolutely right. If we could prevent low information voters from existing by virtue of informing them all, I think things would be a lot different. There would still be those so-called progressives, and the reason I refer to them that way is because I really don't see where you're making progress if you're trying to move a capitalist system to a socialist system, which every time it's been tried and every model that's been used, it fails horribly. Where's the progress there? You just have a group of elitists who believe they're going to be at the top of that staircase pushing for that agenda because they think they're going to benefit, and they really don't care what happens to those low information folks when it's all said and done.
The poor of the middle class lose out in all of this, Tim. If the liberals get their way, the poor and the middle class will suffer greatly. I remember as a kid in the 80s seeing on the news the lines at the grocery stores in the Soviet Union and, the shelf with a few loaves of bread and hundreds of people in line looking for stuff, and the grocery store empty. It's what happens when liberalism prevails. And the poor people and the middle class people are the ones that suffer, not the rich, not the wealthy. The wealthy in those societies stay wealthy, but the poor starve to death, and the middle class disappear. And that, we're not going to get help from the media. We're not going to get help from the education system to turn low information voters into informed voters. That's why we've got to get out there in the highways and the hedges and convince them.
You're absolutely right. All right, I have put in today's show description for those of you who are checking out the show and listening live and are at the Blog Talk site itself, links to Danny's Facebook page, to his Twitter account, and also to his blog page and his campaign page. On one of these pages, you have a list of things that are basically your platform. I'd like to ask you a few questions around some of the higher points of the platforms, and then give you a chance to add anything you'd like to add after that if you don't care.
Sounds good.
All right. We'll start actually where you start. First thing you've got listed, and I'm assuming they're not necessarily in the order that you see as being most important, but we'll start with the economy. Right. As far as the economy is concerned, what would be your solutions or your starting point towards working towards solutions?
What we have to do, and like I said, I'm a project manager for a small business here in Nashville, Tennessee. I deal with budgets, I deal with customers, I deal with employees, I deal with the owners of the company. So I know a little bit about business. I'm not an expert, I'm not a pro, but I see how the wheels turn. We got to get the government out of business as much as possible, because all it does is slow it down. Regulation, regulation, regulation is burdensome. It adds to overhead. It drives up costs. It slows everything down. It's wasteful. So we've got to get that out of the system. And key to our economy is taxes. And I've got another platform there on taxes, but I'll just go ahead and lump them together. Taxes are just so regressive. They hurt our economy. They take money out of the consumer's pocket, hard-earned money that the consumer earns. When you go to work and you earn a paycheck, whether you're paid weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, ever how you get your paycheck, you earn that money. That is your private property. It is up to you what you do with it. If you want to put it under the mattress, you should be able to put it under the mattress. If you want to put it in a stock or in a bond or in a mutual fund, you should be able to do that. If you want to hand it all to your kids, you should be able to do that. But no, the first people that get their grubby hands on it is Uncle Sam and this Congress that none of us like, these low approval ratings. They take it, this president that has a 37%, this government takes what you earned. We have got to recognize that that's our private property. If they pulled into your yard and took your car, you would raise Cain about it. If they came and padlocked your house, you'd raise Cain about it. But the very fact that they do that weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whenever you get your paycheck, every single time, and we don't say a word about it, our forefathers said that it was immoral, that it was unethical, and that it could not happen in a free society, yet it happened in the early 1900s under the 16th Amendment, and we allow an income tax, and we've got to abolish the income tax. We've got to repeal the income tax. We need to replace it with a fair tax, a national sales tax, and our economy will boom. Whether people understand it or not, corporations do not pay taxes. Corporations pass those taxes along to consumers, to the public, to the customer every single time. Unless corporations are going out of business, then they'll eat the tax and they'll go out of business. But part of our overhead, part of every company's overhead, is that tax burden figured in. And our customer gets it every single time. But if we get rid of these income taxes and these corporate taxes, then our economy is going to boom. You will have more money in your hand, more money in your pocket to buy the things you need and to buy the things that you want. Companies will have more money in their hands, more money in their pockets to invest. Every time you pay $10 into Social Security, the company's paying $10 into Social Security on your behalf. That money will be freed up for them to invest, for them to give you a raise, for them to pay off some debt that they have, buy some new vehicles, buy some new office gear, whatever it may be, and invest into bigger projects. Our economy has got to be turned loose. It's a free market economy. We use the word capitalism a lot, and I believe that we'll find that the roots of that word actually come from Karl Marx, the socialist himself. But free market economy is what we have and what we want, where people make decisions for themselves. and they go get what they want. They go do what they want, and nobody intrudes on that. Nobody gets in the way of that. We've got to free this thing up. If you handcuff one hand behind my back, it's going to be hard for me to do much of anything because my hand's tied behind my back, and that's what we've done to our economy through all this regulation and all these taxes. And it's time we freed it up a little bit and let it ride.
All right. Well, I think that pretty well sums it up. I do think that it is really hard for people to understand, too, that it actually doesn't benefit the government to constantly raise taxes either. We've seen over and over again, although I've got a truckload of liberal-leaning acquaintances that argue with me that it's just not true. But we've seen on multiple occasions when we lower tax rates on American citizens and businesses that they actually have an increase in tax revenues. Because when that economy is allowed to take off and function in a healthy fashion, suddenly you've got a much bigger piece of the pie to take that smaller percentage from. And I try and illustrate it with a pie chart. It's like, well, if your pie is this big and you're taking 25% of it, okay, here you go. But if your pie is this big and you're only taking 5% of it, well, look at what 5% of this size pie really is. So, yeah, I mean, that's dead on. Let's move on. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have something else to?
Well, I was going to say back in the 30s and 40s, the income tax rate on the top notch was like 95%. Now, I highly doubt that anybody actually paid that. When you have these high tax rates, you give people a reason for tax evasion, and so nobody's paying that. Nobody in the right mind is. Another thing I'd like to throw out there is these high tax rates have caused manufacturing to run to China, to run to Vietnam, to run to India, and then we let them make those products and sell them back to the American public. If we just, and we're not making income tax off of those people. We're not getting that corporate tax out of them businesses anymore because they're not here. But if we would allow them to come back at that same tax rate, which is zero because they're not paying tax right now, it would bring all those jobs back. It would bring a lower cost product back, and that would really boost the economy. We need to repatriate those companies, not for 5 years, no taxes, forever, no taxes, because right now, that's the way they're operating right now. No taxes because they're in Vietnam, no taxes coming to America because they're in China. So it's not going to hurt us to let them come back at a zero tax rate. It will help us by giving us much-needed jobs that people want, manufacturing jobs. So let's let them have it. Let's bring it back. Let's give this economy a shot in the arm.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to a different topic real quick. We'll shift gears. Definitely a hot-button topic recently, to be sure. Healthcare.
Healthcare. I have a pretty nice health insurance policy. And a lot of times we mix up health care and health insurance. Health insurance helps me pay for my health care. My health care should be between myself and whatever doctor I choose. In fact, if I want to leave my wife out of that equation, I have that right to do so. But the government now wants to get involved in that. So I can tell the doctor, my wife cannot know my diagnosis or the prognosis or my treatment. But the government is now saying we must know the diagnosis, the prognosis, the treatment, the medications. I mean, how absurd is that? But my health insurance, and I pay a pretty penny, it's about $10,000 a year for my family of 8, and we have a nice policy, and I'm very worried that it's not going to remain so nice. The premium has gone up twice this year. They tell me it's going up again in January. My prescriptions for my son who has epilepsy have gone up 50% since January. The only common denominator is Obamacare. and that is very frightening. $10,000 out of my pocket every year already. It's already a gamble. I'm going to spend $10,000 and hope that it pays off when I go see the doctor, and now it's going to cost me more. But health insurance, we need to back up, and we need to make a free marketplace out of health insurance. So we need to make a free marketplace out of health care. Doctors need to be released from the burdens of they're going to be sued by everybody that walks in their office if they make a mistake. Well, they diagnosed me with the flu, and I really had the colds, and that doctor has to have these high insurance rates to cover himself or herself because they might get sued over something. We need to release that burden, which gets into tort reform and a whole other subject, but we need to have free markets in our health. I'd love to be able to walk in my doctor's office and see a menu, open up a brochure and say, this costs this blood work costs this, the MRI costs this, the vaccine costs this, or whatever it is that you're going to the doctor for, and you know right up front what it costs. I was hospitalized one time with a surgery, and they were going to give me some ibuprofen, and I said, no, my wife has that in her purse, and I took my wife's. When I got the bill, I got charged $8 for 2 pills that I didn't even take. That's absurd. And if you knew on the front end that you were going to be charged $8 for 2 pills, you'd deny it every time because you'd say, well, I'm going to walk across the street. My family member will go down here to the vending machine and get me some cheaper medication. We need to be informed. If you went to a restaurant and didn't know what the price was, you wouldn't stay there. There's no way you take a chance and get to the register and find out you spent $300. But we do that at the doctor. And that's a cultural problem that we have, and it has compounded this situation, and it's given the left an opportunity to slap socialized medicine on us. It is going to destroy our health care in this nation. I do a lot of work for doctors here at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, at Baptist Hospital or St. Thomas Midtown now, various doctors, private practices around town. I'm in there doing electrical work for these guys and gals, and every single one, this is not an exaggeration, 100% of them tell me that Obamacare terrorizes them and terrifies them. They're talking about leaving their practices altogether. These are people that have put 8 to 12, maybe 20 extra years of education into their career. You know, a lot of people go to school for 12 years, school for 16 years. These people are going to school for, 16, 20, 25 years. They're ready to hang it up because of Obamacare. Well, you get your subsidized government health insurance all day long, but it won't do you any good if you can't find a doctor that'll treat your symptoms. And people need to understand how things work. Nothing in this world is free. Somebody's paying for it somewhere. And quite frankly, the people that are paying for it are tired of paying for it.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and open up the phone lines, and we'll see if anybody wants to call in and has any questions. And then after we do that, I'm going to continue to ask you some other questions here from your platform, and we'll continue with that. So if anybody listening does have any questions for Mr. Page, feel free to give us a call at 347-426-3550, or if for any reason you need to take advantage of a toll-free number, we happen to have one of those, you can give us a call at 888-287-5313. And in the meanwhile, let's go ahead and address education.
Tim, as I mentioned, my 6 children are homeschooled. They've never been to a public school, and it has its pluses, it has its minuses. My kids get their social activity and social lessons from the church that we go to, what they call a mega church, 4,000 or 5,000 members, and there's hundreds and hundreds of kids. So our kids aren't missing out on that. Our kids aren't aren't backwards because they're homeschooled, and they're involved in a homeschool group where we meet, and they go on field trips together, and they have their friends, and they do sports and this and that, guitar lessons, whatever the need or want is. But school, we need to break it down. School for a child needs to be between the parent and the child, or the parent and the child and the teacher. It does not need to be by some bureaucracy located in Washington, D.C., dictating what my kid can do, what my kid can't do, what my kid must learn, what my kid cannot learn. That's absurd. That my kid can't pray when they go to school. I mean, talk about intrusive. Ever since the federal government instituted the Department of Education, test scores have fallen, dropout rate has risen. Could you have ever imagined that someone would graduate high school and couldn't spell their own name? That's not something that I ever thought feasible. But that has happened with our federal Department of Education. I want to repeal that. I want to remove that. I want to abolish the Department of Education. And people need to realize that when the government was shut down, the federal Department of Education was shut down. It is a non-essential part of the federal government. Your kids still went to school. They still had school lunches. They still were taught math to whatever degree they're teaching them math. They were still taught spelling and reading and history to whatever degree that is. That Department of Education is not needed. It is a waste of money. It is a place of propaganda where they can institute leftist ideas into the system and put pressure on the states and on the local Board of Education. Here's a big old pile of money if you'll do it our way. Common Core is the big thing that's coming out of Washington now. They've put a face on it. They put a name on it. They put a spin on it that makes it look like it's coming out of the states. It is coming out of Washington, D.C. It is a brainchild of Bill Gates and a few other wealthy individuals in this country who stand to make a pretty penny off of Common Core when it's fully implemented. And we need to run from that. One of the books on the reading list that my 15-year-old son would have at his possible assignment was absolute pornographic filth. And I'm not some crazy religious nut that you know is this psycho on here on the far right end. It was pornography. It was filth, and that has no place in a high school, in any school in this nation except for a college, if the people, so because them are adults, if the people see fit. But never in a government school, never in a private school, K through 12. You'll not find it in a homeschool, I guarantee you that. But we've got to get a handle on this because they're dumbing down our society. We, in my line of business, we have a trade school that teaches people how to be electricians, teaches them electrical theory. We give them on-the-job training. My company happens to employ half the teachers at the Nashville-based school. The math for electrical work is quite hard. It's not a breeze. It's not a walk in the park. Under Common Core, those kids that graduate will never be able to make it through trade school. It'll never happen. Because the way they're going to do math, 2 plus 2 is 5 if you can prove it. We won't make you believe it's 4 if you can show us that it's 5. Well, guess what? In my industry, it is always 4, and it can never be 5. And they're never going to be able to pass trade school, let alone go to college.
In your line of work, anytime 2 plus 2 equals 5, somebody could die. Quite
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, along similar lanes, I do this, and I'm also part of a management team for a food processing and food manufacturing company. And we've recently had a reasonably large increase in personnel requirements. And we've been going through our particular applicants. And as a result, we've had some folks that we've discovered just can't do simple mathematical functions. So we were discussing the possibility of adding a small mathematical portion into our pre-employment screening. And we legitimately sat down, had a discussion, and decided against having any addition of fractions as part of the test because we were afraid that would disclude too many of our applicants from possibly getting them in. And if that doesn't tell you how sad that our educational system has gotten to, that if you're anywhere where you're concerned that people will simply not be able to add fractions, well, I can only imagine how scary it is for the kind of work you guys are doing with the mathematical requirements there.
Tim, I'll tell you, in school, my subjects that I really liked for English and history, social studies type things, a little bit of science, it was not math. I got by. I did well for the most part. I was an AB guy until I got a little bit lazy in high school, and I got most of my credits in my first two and a half years, and so I was able to take it easy when I was a senior. But and I took college prep courses, algebra and geometry and algebra 2. Of course, nowadays they're learning that kind of stuff in middle school to some degree. But when I went to trade school, the requirement was a year of Algebra 1. I said, okay, I got this. And about a week into it, they threw trig at me. I said, now, this wasn't part of the discussion when I signed up for this, and I don't know trigonometry. And guess what? Then he got to learn trigonometry on his own if he wanted to be an electrician. And I do use math every single day, whether it's for budgeting jobs and estimating jobs, or whether it's actually in the field making electrical systems work, installing conduit. It is a lot of math. And I was talking to a middle school teacher one time who taught math, and I always said in school, where am I going to need this? Well, guess what? I need it every day in my job, and I had to learn it on my own outside of school because it really wasn't pushing. My teacher could not tell me where I might need it, and that's part of a teacher's job, part of a guidance counselor's job to say, the reason we're teaching you this stuff is because you're going to need it. And you know what's crazy? You have to learn English every year that you're in school, 4 English credits in high school. But you can learn English in science class, in math class, in history class, in basically any class you could take, but we're letting mathematics and history and science be second fiddle to English. When English is just a repetitive, time and time again, you're learning the same thing over and over and over again, compounded into your head, and we're missing out on some things that we're really, really going to need in life. So I think our education system needs to be given a second look.
All right. I hate to start rushing you, but we are getting close to the end of the hour. I definitely want to hit on immigration with you, and then I wanted to hit another quick question. So real quick, what's your ideas towards immigration?
All right, real quick. If I lived in Mexico City, I would swim that Rio Grande to get to America and find me a job to get out of that war zone. I understand where they're coming from. But if I swim across that Rio Grande to get out of that war zone and that just awful economy, awful situation they have, I would be an illegal immigrant. I would be breaking the laws of this great country, and I should be a number one priority of the federal government to be rounded up and sent back. So I understand why they're coming. That makes all the sense in the world. The reason I stay in America is because it's a great place to be. So I'm not surprised that people come here and try to come here by any means possible. But immigration reform, as our Senator Bob Corker authored, had nothing to do with immigration reform. It had everything to do with amnesty. And when we give amnesty, when we turn a blind eye towards wrong behavior, illegal behavior, then all we do is reward it, and we say, bring everybody else, let everybody else in. We send a message out there to the world that it's going to be okay. It may be another 15 or 20 years, but we'll reward you too. That we cannot do that. We don't know who has come into this country. We don't know if they're terrorists. We don't know if they have diseases that we've all but eradicated from our nation. We don't know these things, if they're criminals, if they're mass murderers. And if you knew how much American wealth is sent back south of the border every Friday at these check cashing places and Western Union places, it would stun America to really know those facts. I heard what it is here in Nashville every week, and it's like $500,000 just here in the Nashville area every week. And, you know, I could only wonder what it is in places like Texas and California and Arizona, where the Hispanic population is even bigger than it is in Tennessee. But maybe we do need immigration reform. Maybe it doesn't take 11 or 13 years to become an American citizen in today's society with computers and the internet and the way of life. Maybe we can assimilate people much faster, and that would be immigration reform, making it easier for people to get here legally. I have a friend who has a sister-in-law in Mexico who works for a corporation that is founded here in America. She has applied for a visa 6 times, and it has cost her several $100s every time. And every time they take her money, and every time they turn her down for something, and I don't know, maybe it's something legitimate, but maybe they need to tell her, you're never going to be an American citizen, you're never getting in. But no, they take her money every single time. That's criminal, it's fraudulent, it's unethical. In those regards, we need immigration reform. But immigration reform and dealing with those who are here illegally are 2 different subjects that the left and the moderates want to muddy together and play on people's emotions and heartstrings and make you feel sorry. We got to quit. This isn't about emotions, people. This is about right or wrong. We are a nation of laws, and we must stand on those laws, rest on those laws, exercise those laws, practice those laws.
All right. Well, again, that is probably one of the best answers I've heard yet in regards to that question. So I appreciate the fact that you recognize there are things we need to do to make it better for the folks trying to get here, and that you also recognize the fact that the so-called progressives are once again trying to control the argument by changing the definitions of the words being used. So that is a great answer, and I appreciate that. We are inside the final 5 minutes here, and, you know, I did want to get to a few other things, so let me go ahead and tell you right now, at some point down the road, if you have time in your campaign, I'd love to have you back on. We'll get some of those other questions and get an update on your campaign. So you're welcome back.
I appreciate that, Tim.
Well, you're very welcome. Did want to go ahead and let everybody hear in your own words, though. First of all, do you know all of the currently declared candidates in this race? I'll let you go ahead and give those names, and then tell the listeners what sets you apart from those guys. What makes you the better choice?
The declared candidates that I'm aware of are Brenda Lenard, that ran against Bob Corker. She got 2.5% of the votes. She has got her name. She's going to put her name on the ballot from what we can tell. She's raising money. She's spending money. She's a full-time student. But she doesn't appear to really be interested in winning. I don't know where her motives are. I don't pretend to know her. I don't judge her. There's a guy named Jerry Davis. He's a regular guy like me. He's a truck driver from East Tennessee, a great guy, a Christian guy, and he stepped up because he felt like nobody else was. There's a guy named John McDaniel. He's a local business owner here in Nashville. He is a conservative, and he is very concerned. And he also stepped up because he saw no one else stepping up. These guys, I've been in question and answer forums with them guys, and they have great responses to the questions. There's a state representative named Joe Carr that's running, and I'll be honest with you, he's ran campaigns before and he's won before, and he seems to be a pretty conservative guy. I take issue with a few things, the way Joe does things, and I believe what sets me apart from all those men and women that I listed was that I have a calling on my life to do this. It is not something that I went looking for, but it is something that came looking for me. It is not a career for me. I have a job. I have a job that I love, a job that works well for my family and with my family. I can be home every night. As I said, I didn't come looking for this. I have a calling to serve, to go and make a difference and come home. I don't have an allegiance to a party. I do not have allegiance to a lobbying group. I have allegiance to my Lord and to my family and to the state of Tennessee that I'm a citizen of. I believe that my answer will always be yes. It will always be no. They'll be very plain. You'll know where I'll stand. If you ask me a question in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I give an answer, and then you ask me that same question in Nashville, Tennessee, I'll give you the same answer. My answer does not change based on the audience, based on the city, based on the radio station I'm on, based on the interviewer. The question's the same, the answer's the same. What you see is what you get with Danny. And what I'm trying to get people to think about, to consider, to meditate upon, is we have elected politician after politician after politician, and there are politicians that are going to be on the ballot this time, and we can elect another one. But every time they fail us, even on their best days, they're failing us because they're not listening to us. They're not voting we, the people, a government of the people, by the people, for the people. They have other agendas. And it's time that we quit with the failed experience. Einstein said if you keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity. And when we keep electing politicians to serve us, knowing that they didn't do it last term, why would we believe they're going to do it today? They're not going to. They're not going to change because they got away with it. They're going to continue to get away with it, and they're going to continue to make large dollars on your back, on my back. It's time that we stop the insanity.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Danny Page, running for U.S. Senate. Appreciate you taking the time and coming on here with us and giving up part of your very busy Sunday. And like I said, you are invited to come on and talk with us in the future. You just want to send me an email sometime, and we'll make it happen. I'll be more than happy to have you on again.
Tim, I thank you so much. I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate the warm welcome and the invite in return. And I really do appreciate what you're doing, being a voice in this country. We need more of that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and best of luck to you in this campaign, and I hope that whatever God's plan for you in this running is fully served. I have a feeling it will be.
God bless you.
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and have a blessed Sunday.